Well, it doesn't matter what we say because
I
it
mean, true.
doesn't matter what everybody else, but it does matter the fact that throughout the week you talk about what if situations and you talk about what we're going to run in critical situation. That's on your game plan, short yardage, at the end of the game, milking the clock, all that stuff. You practice it and play in mind that you're going to run. Sometimes it's a sneak, sometimes it's something else. It all depends on how the game is going. But from a defensive perspective, we had completely shut them down the whole second half. Three straight 3-and-outs. We're getting really good pressure on the quarterback. Ball. And in his mind, I'm sure he felt like he got money in the bank with Rodriguez. And his first reaction always, just like he's always been brought up as a defense. I was an offensive coach. Sometimes I had to curtail myself a little bit and underground your defense. And sometimes he probably needs to look the other way too. But in this case, based on the way the game was going, if you were playing against an offensive juggernaut to go on and go for it, put the game away. But at that point, they really had. So, but there's going to be some times during the year where what the game is now dictates it too. Are we stopping them, or are they really going up and down the field? So I'm sure. I don't know how many people stayed up and watched it, but when Mike Leach was up 32 points in the third quarter, he probably thought his defense was in, but he forgot to tell his team to take care of the ball. The team was ahead 32 points back through 9 touchdown passes, and they lost. I mean, that's unbelievable. 66, and particularly to BY to UC. But getting back to our deal, you know, that's why people can second guess all they want to, and there's a lot to be said about going for it. That's for sure, particularly when you got a team like we got. But I want to say this: the offense a little bit. We saw some stuff last night by a better team than we've been playing against that we're going to have to adjust to. What we're going to see all year long is linebacker run throughs, linebacker scrape offs, angles by the defensive tackles, because you just can't sit there and let us maul you. But the good part about it, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to play single high safety. And when you do that, then you eliminate the jams on the perimeter, and it opens with our wide receivers, which that's what happened. And that's where Jake really busted them up in the third and fourth quarter when they went to that single high, because they came out of the game and felt like they could try to do that to us. And their whole point was they were going to make us beat them throwing the ball. That's the way I felt like it.
I do want to come back in here real fast, and we are on YouTube, broadcasting live now. Just a little quick reset. I'm Dayne Young from UGAsports.com. Radi Nabulsi, you see him on your screen right now, the publisher of UGAsports.com. And we have Coach Jim Donnan on the line with us. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask Coach Donnan or Radi or myself, please drop them in the comment section here on YouTube. While you're here, be sure you're subscribing to UGA Sports. It's called Georgia Bulldogs on YouTube. You subscribe on that, you're going to get everything that we do the fastest that we can get it to you. And if you look at the amount of content that UGA Sports generated last night, it was impressive, especially for a late game. Radi probably just woke up, if I had to assume.
Actually, you stayed up. We worked till about 4 o'clock in the morning last night. But when everybody got up ready to go to before they went to church this morning, there was a lot of content for them to read. And right now it's 50% off for new subscribers. So.
How about that? Get in the
50% off.
50%.
And
nice.
So it's $49.99. Then they give you $49.50 in free gear at the Georgia fan shop. So you get you a new hat, you get you Georgia over Notre Dame T-shirt. It was if you want a sweatshirt or whatever, they're going to give you $50 in free gear. So it's only $50 for a year, and then you get $50 in free gear. So if you're not a subscriber, you better do it before Tuesday when that deal ends.
Very much so. I want to talk about the atmosphere a little bit of Sanford Stadium. I know you guys have touched on it some, but I just saw your photo, Radi, of the decibel meter that popped up on our stream in the center of our YouTube page right now. The lights, the sounds, the atmosphere. Kirby Smart said he'd never seen a game that was affected the way that UGA fans affected this game. What was that like being there from beginning to end?
Well, it was interesting that in one of the press conferences, the one you cut up, uh, uh, Brian Kelly talked about the fact that they piped in crowd music to prepare for this game. Said we had it up to 107 decibels. Didn't think he'd need to go quite that high, but you make it worse than it's going to be so that you can practice. Well, actually, inside the stadium, it got up to 114 decibels. It was incredibly loud. Somebody tried to call me in the middle of the game, and I picked up the phone, and it was just, I'm like, I don't know. I can't hear you. There's no way. And even with the phone jammed into my ear, I couldn't hear a word. So I'm like, hey, I got to text you. So we're texting back and forth. Our 12 penalties for Notre Dame, and so many motion penalties, so many procedure things, so many issues that they had because they couldn't hear. You can go to that silent count all you want, and you go to the clap, whatever. It doesn't matter. The place was a zoo. And Kirby Smart, after the game, said, look, I've been in a lot of big games, and he has. He's coached in national championship games. He's coached everywhere. He said, I've never seen a crowd affect a team more than what I saw tonight. And not only did you have the situations where there's guts and illegal procedure, you also had them calling timeouts. They used up their timeouts. What if on that last drive, they get the ball back with 2 minutes, they've still got 3 timeouts to use? They can change plays. And you saw what happened when they got down on the goal line. They had a couple of interesting plays there that Georgia wasn't ready for. I'm sure Brian Kelly had maybe 6 or 7 more of those, but you didn't give them time. So the crowd affected it. The recruits, Jake Roos has some recruit reaction already on the board. Just if you are a young man and you're thinking about, do I want to play here? Do I want to play Tennessee, Florida, Ohio State? And you come to that game, you saw it last night when the lights went down and the LEDs popped up and everything went crazy. You're like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to play here. I'm going to play at Georgia. This place is nuts. And you saw all the pretty co-eds. You saw the former Bulldogs that are in the NFL. You had to be thinking, this is football nirvana. And, hey, they just beat the number, win next week. Look at all those freshmen playing. There are freshmen out there, and this crowd is roaring over them. Hell, they even cheer the loudest for their kicker. Imagine what they would do for me when I'm all SEC or an All-American. So if you're a Georgia fan, a recruit, you had to be impressed with that. And I've had Georgia fans say, look, this is one of my top 3 games ever. These are people that have been going 10, 20 years, 30 years. They said this is one of the best environments ever. I think the game was overhyped. Although everybody watched it, everyone was making too big a deal out of it because either team could lose and they'd still be in the playoff race. But you had a situation where the crowd lived up to the hype, and the crowd was insane.
I do want to correct you on one thing, though. It's not just any kicker. Rodrigo Blankenship is one of the most dominant weapons in America, any position on any field.
If you're a 5-star defensive end, you don't know that. You're thinking, oh, wow, boy, they love their kicker here. Imagine what I'll be like when I come here. So if you're, Darnell Washington, a 5-star tight end, or you're Noah, inside linebacker, any of those guys, you're like, damn, they love this kicker. All right, I'm gonna be a superstar here. So it was very effective. And again, the light show was lights out. It was impressive. And we asked. The coach after the game be like, hey, Kirby, what do you think of light show? He's like, I didn't see any of it. I didn't pay any attention to it. I just thought the power went out. Liar. You're such a liar. And he's too much into it. He was, he was coaching over there. And so when they had the fourth quarter break, he's over there trying to get his team ready because they're still in a dogfight. But you got to be impressed with that.
Coach Donnan, I want to bring you in on some of the special teams discussion because when you're looking at the muff punt that Tyler Simmons had, kind of an off night for Jake Camarda punting, and Rodrigo Blankenship being as solid as ever, he continues to be consistent. Just where do you think Georgia's special teams as a unit is right now? And it seems like that's where a lot of the swing plays in Saturday's game happened.
Yeah, I think you're going to have some situations where you're going to miss a punt. That's going to happen. I wish we could be perfect on that. He just kind of misjudged it, and he didn't. You always want to get your pads squared up and be where you're not reaching down for the ball. Anytime you're reaching down like an infielder, you got a chance to really muff it, and that's how he just misjudged that. He wasn't up on top of it. And then we had another bad mistake, and Kirby was jumping on the fact that Blaylock let that ball roll a long way. One of the best things anybody can do is fair catch a punt, because yards is 2 or 3 first downs. When they add up, it's 2 first downs if it's 20. But the main thing there is that, from my perspective, it's just so. I remember one time I was talking to Bill Parcells when he was coaching at New York Giants, and we had coached together at Florida State, and I was at a game that he was getting ready to coach. And he said, what's really heartwarming to me and helps me sleep every night before a game? I don't even know. I thought he was going to say having Lawrence Taylor rush off the end or whatever it might be. He said, knowing that my kicker is going to kick the damn ball in the end zone every time, and we're not going to help off. And that's the same thing with us. We did one last night where we had an interesting scenario there where they had a hold, and you got to go on back and kick it again. We had to decide how we wanted to play it, but it's just a situation where it's so given that the guy is money in the bank on kicking field goals, and he's the same way with doing a really good job of putting it in the end zone. I know one thing, that back when I was coaching at North Carolina State, there was a guy over at Duke who was a good coach. His name's Mike McGee, and they had some trouble with kickers. And he said, hey, a kicker's like a streetcar. They come by every 15 minutes. And he got his ass beat because he didn't have enough street cooking. I can tell you that, because he wasn't having a good kicker. Now, I love to have me a good kicker I can depend on. And we had a great one here. Billy Bennett was awesome. And, over the year, all the guys I had here were good. They all kicked well for us. And Billy was the last one. But it's just always good to know that you got a guy that can get it deep. But certainly discus the fact that Camargi, he's really punted well all year. I mean, he had 2 bad ones last night, and Kirby's going to stick with him because he has a great foot. He had one where it looked like he was a little pressured there. Man almost backed up into him. So, but that was a bad kick at the end of the game.
Bulldog Bob checks in on the live chat on YouTube and says, Coach Donnan is a legend. And Bulldog Bob has his own following on the Dog Vent. I'll leave it at that. Come join the Dog Vent if you want to know the legends of Bulldog Bob. Radi, one of the questions...
Two other kickers I was trying to do is Hap Hines and Dax Langley. They both did a good job for me, too. They were good kickers.
Georgia's had a lot of great kickers over the years, for sure. But I think Rodrigo's right up there at the top with any of them right now. I mean, he is entering Kevin Butler-esque standards at this point. That's the level that he is climbing to.
Yeah, but eventually he might be able to get to Rex Robinson levels, but let's not get crazy.
Roddy, one of the questions that we had was about James Cook, and I think you could even say a little bit about George Pickens as well. Some of these guys that we saw a lot of the last couple of weeks just didn't end up with many touches against Notre Dame. Your reaction to that, and then, it wasn't an injury thing. It definitely just seemed like schematic, decisions from the coaches.
Well, I don't know why they didn't use James Cook more. I thought a couple of those plays they ran with Matt Landers with James Cook, and that's not to take anything away from Matt Landers, but I'm with Coach Donnan. Every time you don't see him get the ball, that's almost a disappointment. He is electric. He is your utility knife that you can use him in all these different areas. He does so many things for you. He's just that speed and elusiveness and balance that a lot of backs just don't have. They'll have a couple of those, but not all of them. He's got them all. So I was a little surprised. He did get one carry. He lost 4 yards on it. They had that jet sweep sniffed out from the jump. They were waiting on him. That was towards the end of the game. Kind of hate they didn't do it. And again, in the first half, he didn't get a touch, nor did George Pickens, although they went to George a couple times. And there's one that was a really bad pass interference that was not called. I tweeted out a picture of it. The guy just absolutely rakes down on George's right arm. George is trying to catch the ball, and he pulls his arm away. And they're like, oh, no, that's incidental contact. That was bullshit. I mean, it was a ridiculous call, no call. And heard later that the announcer said, "Oh, well, that's a good no call." No, that's terrible. You don't have to defend them all the time. If it's a bad call, it's a bad call. DJ Daniel got called for the same thing earlier in the game, and God, if attack, then go back to last year, and Tyson Campbell wants a refund on all his pass interference calls. But one thing that Kirby Smart, he was asked about that, about those guys not getting quite as many touches, and he didn't say anything about Cook, but he did mention that George Pickens, everyone thought, well, he's one-on-one. Don't you want to see that one-on-one with as Coach said, the single high safety? He said, look, he's not so much one-on-one. They're playing quarters. So this is where we turn it over to Coach and say, Coach, you understand the offense and defense better than anybody. If Kirby says it wasn't just an automatic to go to George Pickens, can you expound on that as to why?
Yeah, they weren't exactly playing press man where you can throw. At the end of the game when they were coming after us, we did throw that ball on third down to him on the fade. But, quarters coverage is where you roll up on one side of the field and play a squat corner where he's just got the flat area, and you got a safety behind him that's playing half the field. Then on the other side, instead of playing the safety's got a quarter of the field where he can really spin down and play the tight end and also play the run pretty good. And then the corner on that side is playing his quarter. So they basically defined it into quarters instead of halves. So you just figured out somebody's got to play the deep. Somebody's got to play the deep outside. Somebody's got to play the deep middle, and somebody's got to play the deep outside. If you're playing force, you can either do it in halves or you can do it in quarters. And if you're playing halves, then the safeties are playing too deep. So that's about as good as I got. The bottom line is
makes sense.
You don't know what they're going to be in, and you gotta get the call. But we've got, and this is being as critical as I'll ever be, but we have to find a way to get those two guys the ball. I mean, that's just the way it is, and you can do that. But I am going to take up for our offense a little bit. Tom Osborne was in Nebraska, and he was really good against some of the lesser teams because they run so many more plays against those. You have more chances. But when you get in a big game and you don't make a lot of first downs, you're not a great play caller, even if you're one of the best ones ever, like Tom Osborne. So last night we didn't run enough plays in the first half to even ability. No. We were just starving for first down. So third and fourth quarter we did a lot better. So the way you get the ball to these guys and make more first downs and get more opportunities to spread it out a little bit.
One of the other,
it did seem like in the first half, Georgia barely touched the ball. It was crazy. Now, granted, they got to make more first downs, but what was it? Just 3 possessions in the first half. It was, and I actually went back and looked at the time of possession, and Georgia actually had the ball more for the totality of the game, but it just felt like they were always on defense. I don't know.
But everybody starting off was raising hell because we weren't running the ball enough to Swift. Because, we threw a lot of short passes and didn't get much out of it. But, hey, probably thought it's Spring Robertson and some of these guys in the ball in the flat. But they were a little faster than I think we first visualized, So that's why sometimes you got to feel them out. And things don't go hunky-dory like you hope it's going to be. Just like I'm watching a pro football game here today, and it takes about the 2 quarters for somebody to make a first down. I mean, who knows? These guys are making a lot of money.
Roddy, one of the
things
that Dayne. Well, I'll wait for that check to clear. Okay, let me know. One of the things you pointed out on Twitter is that when Isaiah Wilson came back in the game in the second half, that it seemed like Georgia's offense really shifted and changed. What did you see that changed when he entered the game?
I'm told by people who know it was coincidence. As Coach Donnan says, that second half, Georgia starts making more first downs, and therefore you see more interesting play calls. The defense is on their heels a little bit. Notre Dame's defense. I don't know that he did anything much better than Cade Mays was doing, But to me, the entire feel of that line changed when Isaiah Wilson got back out there. And to Coach's point, we started the show off with what other team in the nation, going up against some good wideouts and a talented quarterback that line would be completely different if you knew that, hey, Georgia's playing without his 2 starting cornerbacks. Well, you're playing without a first-round offensive tackle on the right side. Yeah, you got some other guys who can take his spot, but they're not as good as he is. And sure enough, when Isaiah Wilson got out there, it felt like I don't know if it's more confidence or just coincidence, but the game turned into what we're expecting. We're seeing more runs. We're seeing more open receivers. I mean, I don't know how he changes any of that, but the game just really felt different when Isaiah Wilson got in there. And shout out to him. I asked him after the game. I pressed him on this. I'm like, how do you feel? And he's like, I feel really good. And of course, he's bouncing up and down because they won. I'm like, yeah, but what's your health? And he just kept saying, I feel good. He wasn't going to go into any medical diagnosis or talk about it. And he obviously was good enough to come back down. And, they do their post-game locker room dancing and everything on one end of the stadium. And they come down the other end and they do their interviews with the media. And if he had really, that ankle was killing him or something, he'd have begged out of it and said, look, no, I'm not doing it. But he came down and he looked very happy. And I think that's a big deal. Also, getting Stokes back on that last drive. Georgia has a lot of injured players, but you got to think with a bye week going into Tennessee, hopefully you get a lot of those guys back and healthy.
Coach, I want to ask your opinion on what I think was probably controversial is not the right word, but it was probably the toughest decision that Kirby Smart had in terms of what to do on a play. So you've got the Jake Fromm comes up a yard short. Georgia's got a chance to either kick a field goal, make it a 2-touchdown lead, or they can try to go for it and get the 1 yard. Everyone says with Georgia's offensive line, you should be comfortable to get 1 yard. What goes into that decision as a coach to say we're going to kick this field goal and make it a 2-touchdown rather than a 10-point game if you don't make it?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that a little bit earlier, but I mean, the main thing is you got to feel for how the game's going. In our case, our defense has been stoning them the second half. We've got one of the best kickers in the world, and you got pretty close to a sure three. And 13 still requires the same thing as 10 in a lot of ways as far as two scores. But the scores have to go. I don't know everything that goes in, but from a standpoint, it was always a gut feel based on how I felt my team was doing and how good the other team was doing. If I felt like we were going to need to score some more points, I would go for it. And then if I felt like that our defense was capable of stopping them, I would kick the field goal. So I think in this case, it turned out to be, fortunately, that we stopped them there. I felt we didn't do a very good job of. We could have shut the game down if we after whatever they tried to kick there. That was a mistake too. Swift should have fair caught that ball. I mean, you know what I mean when they kick that ball like that down the field. You got to fair catch that, and that's a learning situation. Radi's going to tell him that the next time he sees him. So,
I'll show him how, Coach. I'll show him how.
But I tell you, Swift's a good kid. He's very. He's dynamic. I mean, we had 98 yards last night, and and 18 carries against a very capable defense that tackled. I thought that's the one thing that impressed me about Notre Dame in the open spaces there. They tackled us a lot better than I thought they would. And part of that probably is the fact we played against some teams that are poor tackling teams, so we made a lot of good plays, in the open fields. But against a good player, high quality 4 and 5 star players at these other teams, that's why they recruited to tackle. I mean, they're going to make those plays. And I'm just going to tell you, the good defensive teams around the country, they can do a lot of things, and have a few flaws. But if you can't tackle, you can't win. Because you can't get them on the ground, you're not going to get them off the field. If you don't get them off the field, you ain't going to be able to stop them. So I thought their tackling was good. I thought ours was outstanding, too. We made some open field plays. Guys like Devon Wilson, when they got a chance to make a play last night, they made them. I thought Webb did some good things, too. And one of the things we talk about on our show on Tuesday is our defense was going to be a lot more capable of running more packages. And even though we had some guys down last night, our dime package at the end of the game a couple times was significant. And the fact we had Webb and Devon in at the same time, and we got a big interception there. because we screwed them up a little bit. They thought that we only had one guy covered, and he led the guy right into Devon. Last year, we wouldn't have been running that coverage.
Good point.
Mark Webb is fearless. We've been putting together our Film Don't Lie piece that will come out tomorrow, and there's one play in the first quarter where Webb comes down and just runs right between the left tackle and the tight end to make a stop on the running back. To be you get the reputation as a receiver. Maybe you might be a diva. He's a former receiver. There's no diva in this guy. He is willing to get his, hand in the dirt, face dirty, whatever you want to say, all the stupid cliches that come with football. He has revolutionized what Georgia has done, I think, at that nickel spot. Just what have you seen from Mark Webb, Radi, that lets you know that that's why he won this position, because there was a lot of competition there in the fall?
Well, for one thing, he's very bright. A lot of people, they'll tell you how much he understands football, and Kirby's mentioned it numerous times. He understands the game. He knows what he's supposed to do out there. Devon Wilson is extremely physically gifted, but I think when you have that kind of back and forth battle, and Devon got a start last night, so let's give him credit. He gets his first start, he gets an interception. You'd want to see that guy on the field. But I think what gave Mark Webb the advantage was maybe a little higher football acumen. But to your point, about knocking things, Mark Webb will knock something in the dirt for you if you mess around with him. He is mentioned by the players as being one of the hardest hitters on the team. Because we always ask, hey, who's a big hitter on, that we don't hear about, what happens in practice? They're like, Mark Webb, he is a physical guy. So, he might have been a spinning ballerina wide receiver, a guy who's making one-handed catches and stuff like that. But a lot of his success was on the fact that he would run over people, run through them. He got separation. You didn't want to press him at the line. He's going to knock the crap out of you. So when he turns over, becomes, sits in that star spot, he's ready to take on big bodies to support the run. He's going to drop into coverage if need be. That is a jack of all trades spot. You have a lot of work to do there. You're going to have some mismatches at times, and you have to be mentally tough and physically tough. And he's tough as nails. So that's what we saw last night. And again, last play of the game, he's not trying to make an interception. He's not trying to do anything stupid. He's knocking the ball to the ground. Hey, imagine that.
Yeah, I'd like
knock
to
the ball down.
something on that too about.
All right, we'll let you
Devon,
this time.
Is the fact that Devon is very confident, and he's also very knowledgeable too. And I remember last year when he had his knee injury, he was out at practice every day. He couldn't do anything, but he had a script of the practice, and the script for the fans that are listening is every time you run a scout team play, you have the offensive play that they're going to run and the defensive call that the defense is going to run. So he was doing a mental rep every day out there.
Wow.
And, a lot of guys will be over there screwing around on the sideline. The coaches aren't watching guys that are hurt. You got too much time you don't have the time to do that. But he was getting those mental reps, and it paid off at the end of the year when he got to play against Texas. So I'm a big Webb fan, too. I think Webb can be a pro player. He's great on special teams. He knows what to do. And having two guys like that. And the star position is what we call, a lot of people would call nickel. But when you have your regular people in the game, 11 players, you usually have 2 ends, 2 tackles, 3 linebackers, or maybe a nose guard, 2 corners, and 2 safeties. But if we don't substitute, then a guy like Alargy would have to go out and play that position in the slot, a lot like Leonard Floyd did, or people like that, where you move out there and the guy, you look out of place because you're a big, strong guy out there, but you don't know if they're going to go to 3 wide receivers. You think they're going to be in 2 backs, and then all of a sudden you can't call timeout. But if they substitute the 3 receivers, then we take it person out and put a guy in our star, and then we put a guy in our dime position too, where we put 2 defensive backs. But our coverages are going to give people a lot of trouble this year, particularly when Campbell gets back. Stevenson continues to develop. Daniels can develop. But our safeties are on a different planet right now. LeCount and Reed playing out of sight. The other thing I want to mention, because I don't get to remember like I used to, but Walter Grant and Amir Speed did a really good job on our special teams last night. They played on every unit, every play. So when you look into 4 kickoff return, kick, punt return, punt, and uh, kickoff coverage. They were in on every one that we did that. Two guys were in every one, played on all four of those teams. So that's a lot of snaps, and they did a good job.
Wow, I had no idea.
I didn't realize
I
that
guess
either.
Well, that's why you got it. That's why you got me on the show, man.
I do want to point out one thing too, though, that Mark Webb, when you take him and you take Tay Crowder, that's two of your starters on defense, 2 of 11 that are former offensive skill players. You've got a former wide receiver, a former running back, and he was a tight end in high school in Tay Crowder. That speaks to the versatility of athletes that Georgia has, but also the quality of coaching to be able to completely shift to the other side of the ball. We know there's Notori Johnson in the trenches too, but I'm just saying in terms of starters, you've got those two guys. That's probably as much as you need to say about how quality the coaching is at Georgia right now, Roddy.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dayne. And you also had in there Walter Grant, who's played running back, and he's sometimes when you've been on the other side of the ball and you know what the other guy's trying to do to you, you can do a better job defending them too. You know the nuances about the little things to watch their stance and see if they got a little weight forward or if they stagger their feet, if they're going to block to the inside, if they're a wide receiver, or whatever it might be. But the bottom line is there on Mark Webb that I like, and I think Kirby has a tendency to really look at maybe some of these smaller schools. If a guy's a really good player, a great player at a smaller school, they're going to play him on offense first. They don't have the luxury of playing guys, having the ability to platoon their players. So you're going to have a really good back or a really good receiver are going to be playing there before they would linebacker or defensive back. So a lot of times you bring in a guy that's a good receiver and make him a defensive back. In the case of Webb, he was kind of called to duty here when we got some people hurt, and he could go over there and help our offense in a New York minute, but, we need him on defense.
Hey, don't forget Mike Thornton, and the switches aren't done. There might be another one before the year is out. So, just saying.
There may be if you see something come up later on the event that says what we're hearing, there's a tease that could be coming in the coming weeks.
Yeah, very true.
Coach, just where Georgia's program is right now, we're now a quarter of the way through the season. You got a bye week to get a little healthy. Tennessee's coming through. I guess a third of the way through the regular season. That's right. 4-0, regardless. Where is Georgia right now? What is Kirby Smart focusing on?
Yeah, one of the things you always do when you have a bye weekend, this year we got 2 of them, is you always look back, regardless of what point it comes, and analyze what we've done good, what we've done poorly, what's won for us, what's gotten us beat. And you can point that out to your players, philosophically and also practice-wise. It's a chance maybe for some of these guys that got some nicks. We had a lot of guys that played last night that had some injuries that were not publicized, but there was certainly something that they had to work through all week, whether it's a hamstring with Robertson, whether it's a shoulder with Simmons, that was brought out. But we don't know about some of the others, but the whole point is you got a chance to maybe give them a day off, which that's hard for Kirby to do, but maybe some of these guys might not have to get ready for next Friday or Saturday like they would if you had a game. So that's going to help. And the other thing is, and I'm not taking the cat out of the bag here, but you get a chance to maybe look a little bit at some of your other opponents on some of your downtime. You're going to work completely on Tennessee for practice and also for, game planning and all that. But you also got some downtime that hopefully the coaches maybe instead of coming in at a certain time in the morning might be able to take their kids to school or go eat lunch with them or maybe go home at night, a night earlier than they normally do just to it's a good way to do it. I mean, that doesn't mean you're slighting anything, but I think it's good to help your family like that. And that's what Kirby does. He's a family man. But the point I would make about what else you would do is a team that's looming in the future for us is Auburn. And we're not going to look ahead to them, but it's nothing wrong with watching their tape. So you know what they're like, what Bo Nix does good right now, because all of a sudden they got a quarterback that can hurt you. They got great speed on the perimeter with that Swartz guy, and their defense is salty. So they've had two big wins. They beat an Oregon team that's going to probably have a chance to win the Pac-12, and they beat a good Texas A&M team at A&M. So I don't think there's anything wrong with studying them a little bit. Now, if anybody says to Kirby, hey, Coach Donnan says you're going to be studying Auburn, that's just what I would do. He probably won't. And also Florida a little bit. Florida certainly got some, a good team, but they got a tough schedule ahead of them too. But it gives you a chance to maybe you're not bearing down on game week. You know what I mean? You got some time there to maybe do your routine stuff, but some of the other stuff you might can just spend a little time on these other teams and it'll help you the week of the game when you already looked at them.
We have a question from the comments on YouTube. Enrique wants to know, why didn't Jamari Sawyer come in when Solomon Kinley left the game with an injury?
That's
why
because
didn't
Justin.
Why didn't Sawyer?
Yes, sir.
Well, he's played, but he's been hurt. He didn't even make the trip to up to Vanderbilt. So Sam Pittman is a loyal guy, and I think the whole situation with Schaefer's an upperclassman. He's worked hard. He's a second-team left guard, and we talk about, hey, you're always going to put the best guys in, and maybe Salyer's better on the right side. I don't know, but I think he probably looked at him from the standpoint of give him a shot to see how he did. Then if he did, maybe move Mays over at left guard and put Ben at right guard. There's a lot of different ways, but I like the fact he was loyal to a guy that's worked his ass off and gave him a shot, and the guy must have done pretty good. He didn't do anything to take himself out, but that's definitely a good question.
Yeah, and remember Justin Schaefer, I guess it was last spring, everybody was talking about him and how well he was doing. I had a lot of guys on the team saying Schaefer's really balling out. He was in that fight. He's just another in the long line of guys who have fought for Solomon McKinley's spot and come up just short. So give Justin Schaefer all the credit. He's not he has played higher than his ranking, and he's pretty damn impressive.
Coach, how would you compare Georgia to what you've seen from other elite teams in the country so far? Because you get to what Radi's told me before, when you're at these games all the time, sometimes you see a lot of Georgia and not much of a lot of other people, and I understand that. And you have the perspective where you're able to see multiple of these teams on TV. So what have you seen just where Georgia's standing is nationally?
Yeah, I think we're one of the top teams in the country without question, and that's not going out on a limb. Our talent level, our depth, our coaching. We've got an elite quarterback that knows what to do and knows what not to do. He takes care of the ball. He hasn't had an interception this year, and that's where you always start. You got to have somebody to get you to the dance. As far as there's teams that maybe got more receivers than us. There's teams that maybe have better defensive lines. Who knows? But I like our D line. I like the way it's coming along. I think our personnel matches up defensively. If I had to rate the defenses in the league right now, the way I saw South Carolina move the ball on Alabama, I think our defense rates right up there. The way I saw Vanderbilt score on LSU, the way everybody's moved the ball, Texas on LSU. So our defense is going to give us a chance against anybody. Then you add our offensive line and our kicking game. I would say we rate right up there with anybody in the country at this point.
Radi, just your opinion of Georgia, where they're at. We'll kind of wrap this up here. We're on YouTube Live right now. UGAsports.com is where you can find us. We're really doing more to pub out this YouTube channel, so be sure you subscribe to this and join the UGA Dog Vent. UGAsports.com. Radi, where your head is, where Georgia, what they've done so far this season, and where they're at heading into this bye week.
I think if this were any other year, Georgia probably loses that game. They came out, they had some trouble on offense. Defense, I don't know that it wasn't so much trouble as you had that one muff punt and you gave them a short field. But other than that, Georgia actually leads the SEC in scoring defense. They're only giving up 10 points a game. Granted, the first three teams were terrible, so that's to be expected. but that's still pretty impressive. And Georgia's rush defense, I mean, you held Notre Dame to 46 yards. You're the number one rushing defense in the SEC. Again, not a great body of work with those first three teams you faced, but you still held Notre Dame. Uh, so, in a game like this in years past where things weren't going your way, you would have had that kind of miasma just permeate the sideline, and everyone's waiting for someone else to make a big play, and then it doesn't happen, and you lose the game. Somehow, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they would have scored on the last seconds, like Tennessee did years ago in a Hail Mary, and you lose by 1 point. It would have been like some weird poetic justice. You beat them by 1 point, then they beat you by 1 point, and the writers would have a field day. This team is different, and I think this game worked out very well for Georgia to actually be tested. Let's go back to last year. You get your teeth kicked in by LSU. That's a different, more mature Georgia team comes out of that loss for the rest of the season. You go back to 2 years prior to that when Georgia gets pounded by Auburn at Auburn. Georgia comes out of that game, sees them again in the SEC title game, whips them, and plays well all the way through, wins the Rose Bowl, goes on to face Alabama. You take them to overtime. You've had those kind of rough losses in the middle of the season that kind of drive you crazy. So I think that they pulled it out. I think that you would not have that same situation before.
And I want to wrap this up with I may be putting you on the spot here a little bit, Coach, but I love your stories. And Georgia may not play Notre Dame for some time now. They've played twice in the last 3 years. For the foreseeable future, they'd have to play in a postseason game. Do you have any Notre Dame stories? Anything funny? Just whether it be a legend or whether it be something that you experienced, something about Notre Dame that we can kind of put the bow on this UGA Notre Dame experience.
Well, I told the story to Radi and I podcast or not, but in 1975, I was coaching in North Carolina, and we had Notre Dame down 14-0 in the fourth quarter, and they decided to make a quarterback change, and they brought in a guy from Pennsylvania we'd never heard of, and a little skinny kid that was bouncing around. He had a good arm, and before we knew it, he'd taken the team up and down the field, and they beat us 21-14. Joe Montana. So that was the first time I'd ever seen him, but he did an unbelievable job. And you just never know how guys are going to develop. But that was a great move by them, and the rest is history. I mean, Dan Devine was the coach, and they went on and won the Cotton Bowl a couple years and did a lot of good things with with Joe Montana at quarterback. And then we also, when I was at Oklahoma, we went up to visit Notre Dame one year just to watch them practice and everything, and see what they were doing. And Lou Holtz was there and all, and Lou was trying to tell us what to do about all these different things. And Coach Switzer, had asked us to look at some of the other things that they did, and Lou said, "You go back and tell Barry," he said, "if I was him, I'd keep running the wishbone," which that's what we wanted to do anyhow, but we certainly did that. So even though we went up there with the intention of picking up some things, but the one thing that I liked about the one play the one thing that Coach Holtz had that I added, which some of our fans can understand, is, used to call plays by the numbers, like a pass route, like a 772 would be a flag, and then a hitch, going weak to strong, or sometime you call, just a word would describe it. But Lou used letters for it, like a hide route was an H, a P route was a post, and a Q route was I don't even know what it was, but he used to say when he had Rocket Ismail, he would have a play that would have the first two letters, and then it would say Rocket on the third thing. So the quarterback knew that if Rocket's name was on there, whatever he did, you just threw it to Rocket. So we had some of those plays like that with Hines Ward and Terrence Edwards, where we would say 989, throw it to Terrence, or you know what I mean? There's no read involved, man. You just hit. And we got that from Lou Holtz about Rocket Ismail. So you catch that one, Roddy?
Yes, sir. Do they have one for Pickens now?
Yeah, let's get one with Pickens and Cook in there. And yeah, I know one thing. We had this guy that played for us that was a coach that ended up coaching later, and he played with a great receiver and that actually played pro ball. And there was a timeout one time, and the guy came in there. They didn't go over to the sideline. He said, "Coach said to throw it to Villanueva or whatever his name was, and if he's not open, just to eat it." And boy, that other receiver didn't like that at all.
I bet he's pissed.
Hey, so he's the only guy out there on the field, man.
That's crazy. Dayne, I wanted to mention, I kind of got lost in my thought there about that game. So last night they were challenged in this game, but they didn't lose it. But I think it was still a big wake-up call that is equivalent of those losses in the past few years. So I think you get the wake-up call, but without taking the loss like you did in the past. And that's why I think that Georgia, even though it wasn't the blow-up that everyone expected it to be, you beat a number 7 team in the nation. And they only dropped to 10, so you still have a win over a top 10 team. And that's going to look good in the playoff committee. So just take care of business going forward, get everybody rested, and we'll have the same show in 2 weeks.
That's right.
Hey, how about last year?
Go ahead, Jim.
Year, Alabama's Citadels wearing Alabama out going into the third quarter last year. So, I mean, things happen to you, man. I mean, that's just the way it is. How about Arkansas last night?
Oh, man.
San Jose State hasn't won a game since Caesar went over the Rubicon against the Power 5 team. They came in there and drilled them right there in hog heaven there. So, I mean, but certainly the good teams, what we're talking about, and that's what Radi. But I think we need to really look at ourselves in the mirror if we're worried about what happened last night. There's some things that can happen, but boy, I think we really can build on this and point out to the guys like Radi said that, hey, football's not an easy game. You just don't go up and down the field and you don't just stop people. You got to execute, and you can't beat yourself. And field position football kills a lot of teams. And in the end, I was out there Wednesday at practice for a little bit, and I heard Kirby. He was beating them to death with the idea that we got to win the turnover battle. We got to win the turnover battle, and that's what we did. That Notre Dame's been winning it all year, and we had 2 that we got from them, and they had 1 from us. So we won that, and we won the field position in the second half by doing a better job of maintaining possession.
Yep.
That's the kind of expertise you get from Jim Donnan, a guy that finds his way to practice and definitely knows Kirby Smart well. So, Jim, you're a Hall of Famer, and we always appreciate your time here and your support of UGA Sports, and our viewers watching on YouTube appreciate it as well. So we'll wrap this up, and you guys will have a podcast on Tuesday, I believe, right, Radi?
Correct. So get
your questions in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for
about it, or what are they going to do?
We shared the